Hello, we will continue our discussion on performance appraisal. In the last lecture on performance appraisal, I was giving you some of the details of what are the purposes and what are the various issues with respect to the performance appraisal. We have seen performance appraisal in the overall context of human resource management and how human resource management has to deliver a value to the organization, and performance appraisal is an important tool in the hands of the managers to understand the needs of the individual on the one hand and meet the organizational expectations on the other, and that is how performance appraisal is considered as a matching process, matching between the individual and the organization. Today we will continue to look into the other dimensions of performance appraisal, and at the end of this session I want you to see various methods of performance appraisal, various components of performance appraisals, and also what are the benefits of performance appraisal to the individual, to the group and to the organization. We will also recognize some of the common mistakes, the errors which will creep into the performance appraisal system. When we are thinking of various methods, as we have already covered the basic objectives and various methodologies, if you see the grading method, the basic approach in grading method is to consider all the features, all the aspects of the individual and grade them, means arrange them, rank them from one level to the other. So that means given 4 employees, given 5 employees working under you, how would you place them? Who is the best? Who is the next best? Who would be at the lowest level? So what is important is that the manager here considers the aspects like attendance, appearance, the overall cooperative attitude exhibited by the employee, the concern for quality, the responsiveness to the others and colleagues in the organization. So most of the dimensions are taken together, and then in the grading method the appraiser, the boss, would rank or they put them into different slots. So in terms of this, if you see, the certain categories of criteria need to be established at the beginning and also must be well defined so that others can also respond to this grading method. So the features one can see, one can assess, could vary from one organization to the other, from one superior to the other, but it is desirable to list out some of the common things. It could be the analytical ability, the ability to analyze, understand problems, generating alternatives, choosing some of the best of the alternatives, some things like that. The cooperativeness, the dependability, when you give give some task to the individuals, then whether they are in a position to deliver with or without supervision. So, without supervision indicates more dependability. Then the self-expression, the individual is able to express and convey his or her ideas to the others. The job knowledge and the judgment what one would bring to the table, leadership and organizing ability. So, one can consider various dimensions of this, and then it is it could be done in the kind of, if you see this kind of a grading is useful at the end of the exam, people are given A grade, B grade, C grade and things like that. It is also possible that you do not see them in kind of a percentage of marks, but you group them into set of categories. Some are excellent, some are good, very good, poor and things like that. So, a qualitative or a letter kind of a grade or a descriptive kind of a grade can be identified a priori, and the individuals are assigned based on the set of criteria, based on the observation, based on the inputs, based on the kind of performance. They can be classified, they can be put into one or the other grades. The other thing is in terms of the graphic rating scale. Rating scale would involve identifying the various shades of the kinds of things what we considered earlier, whether the job knowledge or the ability to do the the ability to do the task, responsibility for things, responsibility for people and things like that. But they are recorded on a scale of A, B, C, D, E, F could be, or it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 meaning could be very low and 5 meaning could be very high. So, a rating scale is provided for each of the items, and it is seen as higher the rating you can see on various dimensions like what I mentioned, job knowledge, responsibility, punctuality, things like that. The individual can be rated, and based on the ratings you can see somebody as very good or otherwise. But this is one of the oldest and widely used technique, and it is deployed in most of the organizations in different ways and different formats. So, it could be the self rating, or it could be the rating by the bosses, or it could be the rating by the immediate boss or by the colleagues, things like that. The other important thing could be a forced choice kind of a description method. In this you describe all the qualities, but then you have to describe who is more this or who is less of that. For example, if you take in a group, okay, who is much more articulative. So, given the two individuals, who is more articulative, given the two individuals, who is more emotional, given the two, who is more committed. So, in other words, what you are trying to do is take set of qualities, and then in a forced choice you try and push into the one or the other categories. So, normally there is no third choice or a fourth choice. Within the given choice one has to push the subordinates into the appropriate positions. So, the first choice is each group consists of 4 descriptive statements concerning employees' behavior. So, the 2 statements could be most descriptive in terms of the favorable, and 2 are least descriptive or could be the unfavorable. So, within the group of people, then you would see who would fit into which of the groups. It could also be there as a kind of a checklist when you try and do this in a way the rater evaluates the overall things, does not evaluate employees' performance, but then you have details. You have the details about what that person does or person may not do on the task. For example, does he keep all his work area clean and proper? Does he keep all the tools well organized? Before leaving the work, does he clean up, keep everything as it was before. So many of these things can be put as a kind of a checklist, and then as long as the person is you are able to take, you can assume that the performance is satisfactory or excellent. It could be seen for some of the routine tasks. It may be about the cleaning of a particular floor, maintenance of many of the machines and areas. What is required is a checklist is put there, so that the individual does that kind of a task, signs and goes. I think wherever you can see routine tasks, standardized tasks, periodic things could, if it is to be done, then the checklist could be one of the best methods. And as long as everything has been done and signed, and then it can see the performance is at the correct level or good level, or somebody has not done. So series of questions regarding the employees and his behavior. So then the rater can also do that kind of a checks, indicating if the answer to a question about an employee is positive or negative, if the rating has to be done by the bosses. So it could be a good thing for a self, the way the individual himself or herself is doing the checking, as well as it could be from the bosses, where they can run through all the questions and then they can say yes or no, or to some degree whether the individual is performing or not. But the question is that each of these items, each of the aspects must be weighed equally, or certain questions may be given more weight depending on the task, but most of the time there are not much of a weightage, or the weights are given between the questions. And so it could be very clearly some of the desirable aspects of the question. Does the employee enjoys his job or not, interested in his job or not? So such questions can be a part of this kind of a checklist. And then the other important thing is about a methodology many people have found it very useful, is a critical incident method. The critical incident method, the supervisor continuously records the various important events of the employee, both positive and negative, systematically in a book. Maybe left side all not so good things, and on the right side all the good things. For example, around 5:30 I had a very urgent work to be completed, so I asked this employee, but he said no, he has to do some work, he has something else, and he walked out. Another situation could be that I had a very urgent work to be done, but this employee is seeing my concern and seeing my pressure. He came and he took initiative and he did all the things. He ensured that I completed all my tasks and supported fully, even though I have not requested him to do anything. And he went out of the way to meet my requirements. So like this, there could be many things could be happening in the job, on the job, in the organization, something very positive, something very negative, or not so appropriate, or very appropriate kind of a behavior. Some are very proactive, some are very reactive. What is the idea of the supervisor is to record some of these incidents, write down as it happens, so that when he sits for a discussion with his or her subordinate, then it becomes very easy. It becomes data based, it becomes mutually verifiable, and both can discuss and agree upon, yes, certain positive things have been done or something more could have been done, and clearly see what that the person should do. So each employee behavior is noted, and then these notes would help, and the superior rates the performance based on this kind of a notes taken. So the notes will guide the kind of judgment, so that the individual is taking overall picture of the subordinate's performance and the behavior, and an agreement or disagreement should be possible because then the subordinate can say, I think sir, you are over interpreting my reaction on that day, don't you know I had such and such a pressure, or don't you know that I have ailing parents at home, or don't you know that my wife is in the hospital. So many of these things they can ask and verify. The other important method one can think of is the group appraisal method. So under this method, employees are rated by a set of appraisers. So that means a set of people would consisting of not only the immediate boss but several of them, and then together they come to a judgment. Sometimes it is the immediate boss, the HR, and the heads of some of the other departments. So in other words, what could happen is these people, particularly the subordinate, may be doing the kind of task where several people receive the services. It could be the cash section, or it could be the materials department, and it's always nice where a set of people take notice of this particular department and also the person in charge of such department, and then so multiple judges discuss and come to some conclusions. It is also possible that some of the methodologies is called as the field review method. Under this method, a trainer employs but from the personnel department, and but interviews the line supervisors, and the line supervisors evaluate the respective subordinates. So that means they together they work and then explore different things. So the trainer is fully equipped with the definite test questions. So the questions are asked and answered verbally, and then the final thing is based on your one's performance. So the success depends upon that kind of an interview. This method is adopted where appraisal or the appraisee provides all the details to the appraisal process or the set of people who are involved. First they go through the reports, but then the questions, answers and the dialogues would decide whether the individual knows and what individual has done in the past few years. Another method very widely used and historically very well established is a kind of a free form essay method. In this method, the manager writes a short essay describing each employee's performance during the rating period, and he analyzes the important goals set for the employee or the subordinate, and what that employee has done or has not done in terms of giving the best of the efforts, and whether the individual has perceived the task very clearly or not, and then how he or she went about looking into the task and the exact deliverables, and what is that person has achieved and what is that he or she should have achieved, taking into consideration all the details of the circumstances. I think that gives a kind of a picture not only for the boss, also to the subordinate. But free form essay method is one such thing where the overall performance is measured based on the strengths and weaknesses of the employees, and also the specific activities of the individual, but the emphasis is not on various aspects of the job dimension. So in this kind of a situation, it is possible that the rater may rate the employee at a higher or at the lower end, because one can give a lot of reasons, explanations and things like that. Whereas in the scale, there is not much of a scope to do or give any of those explanations. But compared to this, force distribution method would be better, because then the rater has not much of a choice. He has to push the individuals. So some organizations believe force distribution method is better, particularly identifying who are the top performers and who are the bottom level performers. Force distribution requires very clearly to spread their employee evaluation and in a prescribed distribution. possibly it is called the 10-70-20, or it could be 20-70 and 10, depending on, but typically it is the 10% top performers, 70% in the middle and 20% at the bottom. However, one cannot remove the role of the appraisers in this whole process, and so that is how the criticisms about the appraisal process as well, where it was described as very subjective and not so data based, not much where you can really verify the contributions of the employees. So the paradigm shifted towards about the delivery, about the results of what one has done rather than what one is. So arguments were put forth. People talked about that you must give less emphasis to the personality, you should give less emphasis to the behavior, but really focus on the results and what the individual has done towards achieving the goals of the organization. I think that is the time where people started talking about the appraisal by results or by management by objectives. This really took off in late 80s and 90s. Several organizations worked through this process of management by objectives. In short, it is called as MBO, has been evolved by Peter Drucker, and many interventions were planned in different sectors, both public sector, private sector, medium sized organization, and all of them felt that the MBO is a very, very powerful philosophy of managing and then making sure that the end results are achieved. So that means it is the best way of operationalizing the set goals, and then through a proper discussion, through a dialogue, both boss and subordinate agree, and then that could be the basis of assessment. And that is how MBO can be defined as a process whereby the superior and subordinate manager of an organization jointly, I think this word is important, identify their common goals. That means the subordinate perceives what are the tasks before the boss, and then they define each individual's major areas and what are the areas in which one should be doing and contributing and putting set of measures. Assessment center method is another way of doing the appraisals. I am mentioning here at this, as we are discussing the performance appraisal, the assessment center method is used both at the selection stage as well as a method for the development of the individuals. It is quoted, basically it was applied in German army in 1930s, but it is a system of or an organization where assessment of several individuals is done by various experts, but basically psychologists using various techniques. So when you see this assessment center method, it is elaborate, and then various departments are brought together to spend 2 or 3 days working on an individual or group assignment. Sometimes they are given tasks to work as individuals and present case studies. Their oral and written communication skills are assessed. Sometimes 2 individuals are asked to work together in dyads, or triads, where the three persons work together, and also the several group activities. And when group assignments are done, you observe what the individuals or the individual is doing and how they organize, how he is putting all the thoughts together, things like that, both at the individual as well as at the group level can be explored. So the question is that when to deploy this kind of an assessment center. Most of the time the assignments are deployed at the time of promotion, and also reviewing a substantial work assignment around the capacities. So both as a potential appraisal tool as well as performance appraisal tool. So, the kind of activities listed under assessment center methods are called the leaderless group discussion, where no agenda gets defined, but the group is asked to define a task and work around that. Sometimes it is also the structured group discussion. In a structured group discussion, the problem is common to all the individuals, and the solutions and the solution methodologies are different for each of the group members, and then you will see how they go through their solutions, put their arguments across. Let me give you one example. It is called a college case. In a college case, all the balance sheet information, when it was established, the current issues, many of these things are presented as a background material to each of the participants, and the assessors would watch what each one of them would do. So, along with the common information, solutions are different for each one of them. So, typically in an assessment center, about 6 participants are taken and 2 to 3 observers would observe their activities, their contributions. In that kind of a situation, the solutions could be that the college has to increase resources. One solution is double the classroom strength. Another solution could be that work in double shift. Another solution could be that create more sections or more in parallel classrooms and sessions, or it could be that retire all senior people, hire more part-time and young people so that the salary cost can be cut down. Or it could be the solution that create more benefit matches using the students and collect money, get more donations from the public. So, the solutions could vary. No doubt the problems of the organization is the as given to all of them would be to raise more resources and make it more effective. So, then you will observe how each of the participants would perceive the problem and argue with others, convince others, and then come up with a proper solution. So, in an assessment center, typically the observers would see and may come to a judgment based on the observable behaviors. So, analytical skills, analysis and organizing abilities are more assessed based on the observable, what one can see the behaviors in a half a day or a day or 2 days, depending upon the design of the assessment center. The other broad thing is to see the human asset accounting methodology, or also called as the human resource accounting. So, it deals with the cost and contribution of human resource to the organization overall, and make a broad assessment of how much of the contribution has come from the existing human resource compared to whatever of the past year. So, additional turnover, additional productivity improvements, you partialize for the human efforts and human contribution. So, the cost of the employee which one can take can include manpower planning, recruitment, selection, training, placement, everything, the direct and the indirect benefits, and then the cost of the human resource then is considered as a standard, and then employee performance cost, and then we will compare to the number of employees. So, if you see that per employee turnover should be about 27 lakhs, that is how if you see, and then for every addition employee what is happening, and one can compare with this kind of a benchmark. So, then if such kind of a contribution is not coming, then you see that employee performance is lacking somewhere. So, employee cost in relation to the total employee turnover is a kind of an accounting kind of a methodology. The other could be the behavioral anchored rating scales, very simple to develop, simple to apply. However, many find it difficult to arrange the rating scales in terms of effective and ineffective behaviors. But if you see the behavioral anchored rating scale method, they combine elements of the traditional rating scales as well as the critical incident method. The example could be many, but what is important is first to identify major job and job components. Let us say that there is a billing clerk employed in a supermarket. So, then first we will see there is a how he collects, organizes the articles before hands it over to the customer. So, some may put everything together, a smelly item, there is some frozen ice cream, then some hot things, vegetables, and then toiletries. If somebody clubs everything and bills and packs it, I think then it is a very, very ineffective behavior. The other side of the effective behavior is as he receives the items, first he classifies into their major classes and systematically he does the billing and puts it into the respective packets and then hands it over to the customer. The smelly ones, the frozen ones, things like that. I think then it indicates an effective behavior. The question is, in behavioral anchored rating scales, identify some of those dimensions, identify the specific behaviors which can be arranged from most effective to most ineffective. I think such initiatives would help in arranging and assessing who is contributing and who is not contributing. So, what we really have to think about is the various other ways of examining the performance appraisal process. I think 5 questions are important: the who of the appraisal, the what of the appraisal, which we have discussed many of this, when of the appraisal, the where of the appraisal, and the how of the appraisal. I think if we can answer most of these questions, then probably it is we would get an overall appreciation of this whole process. The question which I have already answered in several ways, but I want to bring this to the focus. The who should be the who should be rated and who should do the rating. I think that is what is the who of the appraisal. And we have heard these terms earlier, the what one should do in terms of the who of the appraisal is that the issue is that all employees of an organization should be appraised. Question is right from the operator to the top level of the management. But for one reason or the other, whatever may be their contribution, that must be assessed. So, the question is who in terms of the who should be appraised, that all should be appraised. Now, the question is on the appraiser who should do the rating kind of a thing. It could be the starting point could be the self, what we call as a self appraisal. It is possible that the self and the boss would do together this appraisal. Sometimes it is desirable that boss and the subordinate also use others in the organization. So, when you see the who of the appraisal, we hear this term called the 360-degree appraisal. So, the 360-degree appraisal is that not only the self, the boss, but also the colleagues in the organization and also the customers and other stakeholders of the job also assess. So, the best thing is the multi appraisals are fine, but the self appraisal could be the starting point. Now, the next question comes, again we have reviewed this, is the what of appraisal. So, on what should be considered. So, the performance appraisal consists of appraising it is non-supervisory employees definitely for their current performance, and as you go up in the organizational hierarchy, it is the managers for their future potential. So, it is not that it is 0 or 100% of this, but it is the matter of degree. So it starts from the current performance at the lowest level, what are their routines, what they are doing, to as you see people at the higher level, the idea is not only what they have done, but what is that they will do. So it is the question of assessing performance as well as potential, and it includes evaluation of sometimes the human traits. So that means it is not only the behaviors, the results, as well as the kind of traits what they bring to the table. So the traits, the attitudes, the behaviors, the results, all are to be examined, all are to be assessed by in the appraisal process. Now the next important question comes, the why of appraisal. We have talked about performance appraisal based on the objectives or the concepts of the MBO, where the boss and subordinates sit together, work on their objectives, review it together, see their contribution, learning from each other, rework on their priorities. So all that has happened as a part of the appraisal by objectives or MBO. But now when we look at the why of appraisal, one need to see it defined very clearly, what is that you want to achieve. One of the clear things need to be seen is to understand the level of performance of the employees in their present job. Who is an excellent performer, who is an average performer, who is not contributing. I think one need to identify some of these things. Another is helping people to improve their performance and understand their needs and give them the chance to explore the opportunities within the organization and provide an agenda for personal growth and development. So the why of appraisal, when it comes, as we have mentioned in the past very clearly, A, to improve the performance, B, to initiate personal actions with respect to who is doing and who is not doing and linking that to the reward systems, and giving them an opportunity to review their strengths and weaknesses and focus on what needs to be done in the future, and certainly linking these information for succession planning and development. From why of appraisal, the next important question one need to explore and understand and answer is when of appraisal. So the question is when this to be done. Ideally it is linked to the kind of the objectives, the what it was supposed to do. We have said earlier that what should be the frequency depends upon the kind of objectives. If it is focusing on the improvement on the job, ideally it is done on a daily basis, or as and when some errors are committed, as and when some extraordinary things are done by the individual, the boss should talk to the concerned person, give them as a kind of a feedback, and through the feedback the individual gets an idea of what correct things he or she is doing and what is that should be done. The other is when you look at for the salary action, when you look at for the movement of people or for personal records, then it could move to the once in a year. And in many knowledge based IT kind of an organization, it is also done once in 3 months, once in 6 months. So the question is, when more and more you are looking into the improvement of the performance, it should be done weekly or at least once in a month. If it is linked to the review of the work, it could be the end of the project situation, or at least could be once in 3 months. When it is linked to the salary or personal action, to be done once in 6 months or once in a year. But if you are really looking into the career planning, succession planning, at least once in 2 years, once in 3 years for sure. So that is what we are talking about when of the appraisal. So assessment center kind of a method fits in where you can do once in 3 years. whereas the bosses should work towards the subordinates' work and work behaviors, work performance through a method of critical incidents. I think that has to be done daily basis, but at least once in a week or once in a fortnight. Then the question is where of appraisal. Where of appraisal indicates the location, where an employee may be evaluated. So it is usually done best in the place of work or the office of the supervisor. Any other place only could create anxiety, but sometimes the assessment center has to be done from away from the work situation. It could be done in company premises, or it could be done outside the organization in a place where there is not much of a disturbance and the individuals are free to work, and then they are not asked to do any official work, or they are not taken out of the assessment procedures. So it is desirable to have such situations away from the organization. And when a committee of people have to assess for the purpose of promotion, it may be within the office premises or it could be away as well. So, but if it is for a daily basis, that is for a day-to-day workplace improvement as well as the improving the performance of the individual, it is best done in the area where the employee works, and the supervisor spends more time with the employee explaining what needs to be done, how better things can be done. The next is in terms of the how, which we have listed all through. That is essentially the company must decide the question of the methodologies, whether it should be based on a simple format, whether simple format or where it includes 7 to 8 or 10 identified dimensions like job knowledge, work methods, cooperation, responsibility. Many of these things can be put on the left side and providing a kind of a scale. So it could be based on the kind of a formats which people call it as performance appraisal formats or the forms, or it could be based on a simple identified time to have a dialogue with the subordinates. Could be every Monday morning or Monday afternoon, kind of a structured approaches, or it could be a combination of methods depending on what purpose it is. So, but all the things whatever we have mentioned in the past, a rating scale, a critical incidents, the dialogue and discussion between the boss and subordinates, self appraisal, many of these things do matter as a part of when somebody is thinking about how of performance appraisal. So, but on the basis of this kind of an advantage and the disadvantage, what is workable and what is not workable, one need to decide which method would be the best and what is the best with respect to the stated purpose. I think in the last part we will look into the benefits of the performance appraisal. If you see performance improvement, I think that is the greatest of the benefits. The performance feedback allows the employees, manager and the personnel specialist to intervene with appropriate action to improve the performance. The feedback need to be structured, feedback has to be data based and verifiable, feedback need to be much more descriptive, not just judgmental, and it should provide insights to the individual about what need to be focused on and how the improvement should be brought about. Apart from improving the performance, the next important benefit of the appraisal process is to do the compensation adjustments. It is always desirable that you recognize more those people who are contributing on a consistent basis. Performance evaluation helps decision makers to determine who should receive pay raises. Many managers make that kind of a judgment that these are my star performers, these are my key players, these are my consistent players, and similarly they also know that I don't want to have so many people in my department who are not motivated, or so and so is not well motivated, so and so is not a team player, so and so is good but not good enough. I think these are all the kind of views which day in and day out the managers express, which gets recorded, which gets noted in performance appraisal. That performance evaluation helps in making these compensation adjustments. It is desirable to give more to those people who are contributing, and you also create a less, or where you don't give much to those people who are not contributing. So very clearly you induce the required performance through these compensation adjustments. Well linked compensation adjustment schemes to the performance appraisal schemes will always bring better, more perceivable benefits. The third kind of a benefit to the organization is in terms of placement decisions. Now, placement decisions we are talking about promotions to move the individual from a lower level to the next level of responsibility. Normally the higher responsibility would also go with higher perks, higher salary, things like that. So the promotion brings a recognition, it brings more responsibility to the individual, and also the transfer. So the individual is moved from the current task to some other task, maybe in the related areas and also not so related areas, and these transfers are done both for developmental purposes. When you look into as a job rotation, transfer can mean a routine activity as a part of the management of change, or the transfer can also mean a punishment where the individual is placed in a position where he or she may not like to do such things. And demotion is another action where somebody is failing consistently and not able to meet those anticipated performance, and that is the time where you push the individual to a lesser role or lesser responsibility, or in the organizational hierarchy they are also moved from one level to the lower level. I think that is the idea of this demotion. The benefits of performance appraisal, if you see further, appraisal data can be used to monitor the success of the organizational recruitment induction practices. So whenever you see the individuals are able to learn and contribute from the day one or at the earliest, that means the appraisal is talking about the success of the good HR practices in terms of recruitment, placement and induction. If people are taking more time, if people are not able to show some extraordinary performance, that means you are not able to attract some good talent. You are not so successful in transforming the talents to give good contribution to the organization. So performance appraisal gives some fair idea about how good the HR practices in terms of the talent attraction, and as well as the initial training to ramp up the abilities and capacities to meet the organizational expectations. Appraisal data, if you see, is also used to monitor the effectiveness of the changes in the recruitment strategies, particularly when you have reduced some of the performance levels or you have increased the performance levels. So such changes can also be mapped in terms of whether some of those practices are bringing better appraisal, better performance kind of a thing. So then you can see whether the existing performers are coming because of the higher cutoff points or lower cutoff points. And by following the data, one can always see what should be the kind of basis or from where you must get your people, and always appraisal data can help you to correct the workforce planning and recruitment practices, and also make sure that whether you are able to attract the right talents. Another important dimension of the performance appraisal is the training and development needs. So it is particularly when you identify the poor performers, they can be identified for the retraining. So it is in the skills or in terms of the attitudes. They can also be sent beyond training for counseling, coaching, and good performers also can be sent for the mentoring and kind of a thing. And as you see this, the appraisal discussions, the employee with the employees and thinking about their performance would also highlight many of the many of the obvious things, and it is important to see what is happening habitually, the idea of training them. So the question is, you don't have to go for training, but do other methods of correction. Performance appraisal can also make the need for training more pressing and relevant, and also justifies the training budgets. So the performance outcome and the future career aspirations always need to be understood, and that is how other benefit certainly includes the career planning and development. The performance feedback guides the career decisions for the individual to choose appropriate career goals and work hard towards achieving those career goals as a part of one's career paths. And the immediate managers do play a big role because they are the ones responsible for the performance. They have also analyzed the performance, and through performance appraisal they have come to some judgment, and when they share these things, they are in a position to provide better insights to the individual to help them to focus on what needs to be done. Another benefit one can see is the motivation and satisfaction. Performance appraisal in some organizations do bring anxiety, do bring a kind of a stress, but on the other side, performance appraisal can also have a profound effect where it helps them to see the new realities. It helps them to refocus their effort and makes them to do things better. So the motivation and satisfaction is another important use of the performance appraisal process, and it also provides a recognition for the kind of work efforts they put in, and then the power of social recognition, you see, has always been the most useful and people recognize that as an incentive. And there is a clear evidence that the human beings, they prefer negative recognition in preference to no recognition at all. That means if somebody is coming and telling them that you have done a great job, somebody is also telling that you should have done better, I think people like both of these things compared to that nobody is bothering about them. I think that means they are not recognized as a member of the organization. And I think let's look at quickly some of the common mistakes. The performance appraisal, where it fails, the lack of support from the top levels of the management usually is cited as a major contributing reason. So that means individual managers are not supported in doing some right things. When they recommend some good talents, they are not recognized or rewarded, or when they say that so and so is not contributing well, no action is initiated by the top, or no action is allowed to be taken at the middle level or at their own levels, then you run into issues. Sometimes it is also political, where people don't want to have, and they have a disbelief in the effectiveness of the appraisal process. They believe that nothing could happen. So it is important that the top management create a value of the appraisal, and then they must show the visible commitment to it. Some other problems are the fear of failure. There is a suspicion amongst the appraisers that a poor appraisal would result in badly and so they would like to hide, they don't want to be open, and they want to be away from the supervisors. And appraisers also have a vested interest in making their subordinates look good on paper. So no doubt they are not contributing, but they go out of the way to, and sometimes they are judgment aversion, they are not in a position to decide who is good and who is not so good. So they want to play safe with their subordinates, and they don't want to give a negative appraisals. So there is a problem of this kind of a midpoint ratings. So it is in the, what we are talking about is when you are doing the self auditing, so it is important that people recognize some of these problems, otherwise it will come as a bigger issue. Further, the appraiser's preparation is also important, that they must know what is that they are examining and whom they are talking to. These kinds of preparations also would help in doing things better. Employee participation is another important dimension, where the employees do get an opportunity to express, and a mutual agreement is a key to success. And performance management, when it is not linked to the rewards and not linked to the various other activities, if it is only an isolated practice, it becomes useless. And what is important is to do a thing in an integrated fashion. We have seen so far the methods of the appraisal, the components of the appraisal process, the benefits, and some of the common mistakes done by the appraisers. What we will do in the next session is to look at the concept and definition and methods of training and development.